And we are live and in action. You are joining the Left Coast Caveman number 68. Nutritional modalities, fitness modalities, and mentality that we discuss at leftcoastcaveman.com. Making hunting and gathering. Let me run that back again. We haven't quite. I know that you don't like the terminology health and wellness and well-being, but I don't know what else to capture it all in under. But the terminology making it all health and wellness, well-being more practical and accessible through modern day hunting and gathering. Supreme being through modern day hunting and gathering. Perhaps we leave it at that. Supreme being. And it's funny, I've been reading the book As a Man Thinketh lately, and I'm not exactly sure when As a Man Thinketh was written. I should know that. I should be able to. I don't have like a Jamie by my side. I should have a Jamie by my side. Say when it was written, but I would guess, and based on like the health and let's call it like self-help genre, I bet all of that literature sort of became popular in the same era, maybe 1700s at the very earliest, and then 1900s at its boom, and then of course where we are right now. But the interesting note that I keep making as I'm thumbing through As a Man Thinketh, and it won't be the first or the last time, is the use of the word supreme quite a bit. And one of the books that was, I would say, kicked off my interest in this whole idea of being supreme was the book Supreme Personality, and just this idea of supreme encompassing whatever it is that we are trying to land on when it comes to health, wellness, well-being. But you texted me a few days ago like, I don't like that word, I want to figure out a different way of describing it. And have you thought of anything yet?
Yeah, and the reason why I don't like it, I mean, it does a very good job of describing exactly what we're after, right? But the problem is it describes a very broad category, and I like to think that we're much more niche than that. We're different than all those other ones, because health and wellness expands to the Ben Greenfield, it expands to the Joe Rogans, the Gary Breckas, like, which are all great, but also possibly the Liver King and all these other, characters in the long line of people put, V-Shred, that's all health and wellness. And once again, there's a spectrum of, truth to it, efficacy, marketing, all that stuff. And that's why I want to pull something out of that category and perhaps even start our own, and thinking about what I haven't put a lot of thought into, like the alternatives, but of course, don't call out a problem if you don't have a couple solutions also. That's one of those things that's always been drilled in me, and I'm very careful to oblige that thought whenever calling something out. So surviving and thriving, I think that's a good one right there, because that also explains what we're doing, because it's not just about surviving, which that is the goal. We do want to survive. We want to be alive. We want to breathe, but we also want to prosper, and that's where the thrive part comes in. And it rolls off the tongue nicely too, but definitely open to other suggestions. This is just, an ongoing thought of how else we can categorize what we're doing. But I think it is just much more, it's outside the category, and it's deeper than just health and wellness. So I think our phrasing should also exemplify that.
Yeah, and we've long stuck with the mission statement of making health and wellness more practical and accessible. And supreme being through modern hunting and gathering is, I believe, our coined nomenclature, or our version of what that is. And I would agree with you that it's more, I would almost say niche, but the niche of it is that it is all encompassing, is that it's not, we've already discussed how Left Coast Caveman is different from your traditional wellness coaches and success coaches and self-help coaches, in that we're not aimed at promoting ourselves. We're aimed at truly making a community that hunts and gathers from all of these modalities, nutritional modalities, fitness modalities, mentalities, and put it all together to make it practical and accessible. And there's one thing I've been working on lately is the differences of Left Coast Caveman and why we stand out because health and wellness is the industry. So we can't divorce ourselves from the industry that we're in, but our aim is more at making these points of differentiation and pulling people out of this fabricated sense of health and wellness and deconstructing all that those people in that industry represents, whether it's expensive devices or exclusive retreats that are for the elite, or I think a lot of misinformation under the guise of science and scientific studies, and this study and that study says this and that. And one note that I made this morning is that we're not a beginning but an end. That we're not like the sun rising, we're the sun setting on a previous model of life. And now that it's kind of like that song goes, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. It's like you have to put to rest all of those preconceived notions of what health and wellness are. And really what we're talking about is supreme being. And what does that mean? Through modern hunting and gathering, we're saying just be human. This is what humans in this modern environment ought to be. And it's a journey of deconstruction and awakening. There's no need to begin something that is already within you. And so, supreme being, through modern hunting and gathering, you've landed at cast number 68. Just a taste of the left coast caveman way of life right here. And last time we talked was 67, and we again, we're doing this for us, we're doing this for the community. We, as representatives in this space, are not claiming that we have we don't have everything figured out 100%. And as the landscapes change beneath our feet, as the modern technology and the left coast environment changes, then hunting and gathering changes along with it. And one thing we talk about a lot, and we talked about last time, was intentional eating over dieting. These little changes of terminology, again, deconstructing what the health and wellness and well-being space typically represents. And you hear it thrown around a lot, dieting, and why we specifically use intentional eating is a way to deconstruct. It starts with words, right? Words matter. These words matter, and that's why you were hung up on the idea of us being in well-being and health and wellness. Well, supreme being, we'll call it, and then how we do it is through nutritional modalities, fitness modalities, and mentalities. Not self-help, not dieting, not workout routines. It's what is the body always doing. And so we landed last time we casted, which was 67, on this bridging between intention. So what is your intention? Everybody who joins the cave, go to leftcoastcaveman.com and joins the cave. All are welcome to join this Left Coast Caveman way of life. They're coming from different places. They're coming with different intentions. They're coming with a different state of being right now. But the idea is that they do want supreme being. And so there's this constant ascension and putting to bed your old self in favor of a newer self and a constantly ascending and constantly improving self. And that comes in very different forms. But everybody comes into the cave, joins the cave from a different perspective. And so your different perspective warrants different intentions. Your different intentions require a different, perhaps, set of nutritional modalities to bridge into whatever your specific intentions are. And so the purpose of today is to at least introduce what some of those, I'd say, core assortment of nutritional modalities and as they tie to intention and fitness modalities are, and introduce this subject of in more depth under intentional eating. And before we dive into the nuts and bolts of that, and I know you're dying to jump in, just letting everybody understand where the Left Coast Caveman way of life begins is primal primers. And that is the base level, the base of the deconstruction period of figuring out what a human being ought to be doing. And as we have this conversation, I'm sure it could be all encompassing of both, I guess we'll want to keep that framework in mind of what's primal primer versus what's perhaps a little bit more technical. If we get a little bit more technical with intentions, which is where you and I are at right now. So we can't have an honest conversation about it without introducing some technicalities, but maybe we start there in terms of like what would be like your primal primer if you're entering the cave, core assortment of intentions versus like your sapient strength, I would say maybe we can discuss that later. But in terms of like, because I'm looking at my whiteboard, I got like 10 of them, 12 of them. So they can't all be primal primer. Maybe they end up, but primal primer, base level nutritional modalities, base level nutritional intentions, and their bridges to fitness modalities. Essentially, what's your fueling strategy? What do you eat, and how does that impact what you do with your body? And with that, I'll end my rant.
Yes. So I think at essence, primal primary is more about building the awareness that most people don't have, right? Modern Homo sapiens are not aware of the calorie content of the food, their energy content of the food. They're not as aware of, how that adds up. They're not aware of potentially all the ingredients that are put in these foods that are quote unquote healthful, right? Or that are marketed in that way. So the first step of that is just to gain some awareness. How many calories do you consume a day? How many are you burning? Knowing your numbers, and then you obviously, as you progress through that program, you start learning more and more about it, gaining these other check marks in nutrition, these other awareness blocks, and obviously, it's something that you will always come back to time and time again as you reacquaint with primal primers and whatnot. But I think the overall theme there is just gaining awareness, because that's where everything starts, understanding. And once you have that baseline, that foundation, then you move on to safety and strength, which is where you start really getting into the nuance of nutrition. And I think that's kind of a substance of what we're talking about today. Is now we're really aiming the intent of our nutrition around activities and what we're looking to do with that, because you're eating for a reason. And we're trying to separate, we're not just eating because it's delicious, because we get a dopamine hit whenever we do it. And although like that very well is entailed, that is a part of it, but more so thinking about, well, I'm eating this way because I have this event, or I want this body composition, or I want to have this level of energy for whatever it is, like knowing why you're doing it, not just, well, I eat oatmeal because that's what the commercials tell me to do, or that's what men's health tells me to do. It's like, which is fine, that you can get by with that, but this, at that level of programming, you're starting to like construct those marketed myths, and now you're starting to be a little more executive over your fueling strategies. And then obviously once you get into the apex actualization phase, which is more of a mastery type area of fueling, that's when you're starting to make your own recipes, perhaps. That's when you're starting to create your own concoctions that are going to help with your fueling, and it's obviously high level, lots of experimentation, but also requires a great degree of knowledge of nutrition, which throughout the program you will learn. Throughout your own discoveries, you will learn on your own, and it's not hard to get, but you do have to pay attention. And I think that's probably for anybody that's starting out and looking to fuel more intelligently, more strategically, is you just got to pay attention. I think that's the big, bringing attention to it. And you'd be surprised that I talk with clients about nutrition and fueling, and just like breaking it down to the ridiculousness. And I had a really great conversation the other day, and I'll wrap this up, about something as simple as at the coffee bar. And I'm actually going to put a piece out on this because I think it's really interesting. Mark, how often do you go to a coffee bar?
I go a lot.
Okay. Do you ever, like, while you're standing in line waiting for your unicorn mocha frappuccino, do you ever like look at the board and you can see all the drinks and all the calorie contents? I think it's a lot in California now. You have to have those up there.
Yeah, but I don't do the mocha frappuccinos. I do a black coffee or but I get your point. Yeah, I do black coffee and Americano. A unicorn, cookie crumble. I got a funny story about that, but anyway, finish your point.
So anyway, yeah, you go out there, you can see it's all laid out in front of you, and you start look. I mean, and a good heuristic, and this is something I'm going to write more about, is the fact that you could pretty much, whatever the cost is, you divide it by 2, and this is actually probably being a little generous, or less generous, I guess, however you want to look at it, but divide by 2, and that gives you the calorie content of the beverage. Hard and fast rule. So if it's an $8
hold on, can you repeat that one? Can you repeat that? I didn't follow that. Can you?
Yeah. So if you can pretty much half the price, and that's about the calorie content of the item. And it's not always accurate. So for instance, large frappuccino is like what, $8 now or something like that. So you could guess that it's about 400, at minimum 400 calories. It's probably a little bit more. It might be like 550. But you think about like, wow, that adds up. So what happens if you have, and keep in mind, there's all great marketing out there that tells you to treat yourself. It's the holidays, peppermint mocha snap gingerbread. Like, how else do you ring in the holidays? It's take a break and all this stuff. So you think about, let's just, for easy math, right? 500 calories for that treat yourself moment, right? You deserve it. Okay. And you multiply, say you do that 5 days a week. That's 2,500 calories. So with just that beverage, not a meal, a snack, some people won't even call it a snack. Oh, it's a coffee. It's a pick-me-up. You just added 1 full day of eating in terms of calories by that snack every day, 5 days, not even 7 days. So when you start reduce, like being aware of the energy content of food, the calories, the carbon of the food, you go, whoa, that adds up. And if you did anything, right, just once again, gaining awareness and small steps leading to, and being intentional, if you just cut that out, you're cutting out 2,500 calories a week. That's impactful. You will see at the end of a month, you will see a difference. You will lose, if that's your goal, right? But I just think, like, long story short, the awareness factor, knowing the content of energy in foods, you have to start paying attention to that if you're going to be fueling intelligently / strategically.
Yeah, you're spot on, and I love how you open and close and center the whole idea of intentional eating around awareness with regard to primal primers, because I think when people select to join the cave and they don't even know what primal primers is, and if you break that down, or they don't know what you don't know what left coast caveman is, you don't know what primal primers are, you don't know what sapien strength, you don't know any of this terminology, but the more you integrate with it, the more it becomes a way of your life, and it's designed to be that way. It's, again, to differentiate ourselves from the typical health and wellness, well-being place. Look at our artwork. It's all designed to be indicative of the journey of life and indicative of the complexity of these things. There is no 30 days to your best weight now, and those things are fun, and like P90X this and 10X that, and these kind of things are fun and they're catchy and they have their place, and they work to a degree, and they should be used as such, like a blade within the Swiss Army knife. Well, we are the Swiss Army knife, and that's what we're saying. And you don't understand until you start to integrate with it, and you say, okay, primal primers, and that goes on in your mind. You're like, primal primers, that means before I do anything else, like, why am I, if I'm unsatisfied with my body composition, if I'm unsatisfied with my energy level, if I'm not feeling good, if I'm not thinking good, if I don't have sustainable energy, good cognitive ability, my relationships are breaking down around me, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm not sleeping well, all these things, but you're on a program, you're hitting the gym, you're sucking down your pre-workouts, and you're sucking down your protein shakes, and you're eating right, and you're doing good, and you're staying active. The primal primers is, in this way of life that we're talking about, this left coast caveman way of life, gives you a more in-depth and complex tool set to start to actually become honest about what all of the, like, deconstructing all that I just said 3 seconds ago and saying, now you have primal primers. Now you have, okay, what am I doing over here in the gym, sucking down this thing and doing that and doing this and calling myself healthy and well, when I'm neglecting things that were of ancient origin that your DNA has within you that human beings ought to be doing every single day. And the primer part of it, and so that's the primal part of it. The primer part of it is like, okay, before you are layering in all these other things. And so I love that you couch this whole conversation of nutrition and intentional eating around this idea of awareness, because as you start to engage in the Primal Primers program, well, some of those your awareness awakens. And so, but if I were to try to think about, like, what are let me back up and say, like, or if you have anything to add to that, like, because I'm always thinking in my mind, like, well, is this primal primer? Like, primal primer's first, right? And then, like, I'm always thinking primal primer's first. And it seems to solve everything along the way. And then I get excited about what other new program I could do, or like you do combat and jiu-jitsu. Well, that's a little bit more advanced, and I would say more applicable to like apex actualization, where you're taking now your primal primers and your sapien strength and you're applying it to a specific set of skills and a specific way of life that is in keeping with the Left Coast Cave way of life. But the Left Coast Caveman way of life supports your success there. Yeah. But the primal primers is always like this program running in the background, and this awareness, it is the awareness mechanism. And then the awareness mechanism becomes more and more advanced as you advance through the Left Coast Caveman way of life. So that awareness then gets expanded. But it's like that thing inside you that, okay, things aren't going well. Okay, I'm getting sick more often. This is happening. This isn't good. This isn't good. This isn't good. It's like, all right, primal primers. Am I checking the primal primers? Am I doing this? Do I know my numbers? And so before I go into, like, I think my top 5, I would say bridges between nutritional and fitness modalities. Fitness modalities meaning everything that you do with your body, and trying to keep it primal before then maybe our next conversation we get into more like the sapien strength bridges between, or getting more specific, I would say, and more technical about these core assortment of nutrition and how they impact how your body responds in a fitness way. I mean, most people will think fitness means working out. When we say fitness modalities, we mean everything that you do with your body, essentially, and including your body composition, including how your body feels, including your mobility, your flexibility, your cognitive ability, anything that your brain and body do. But before I go, because I really want to unpack this awareness conversation too, because I think that's where it starts. Like, I think primal primers, okay, now you're going to start becoming aware. But then before you go into sapien strength, you really have to bridge that awareness with your intention. And so you come in, you join the cave. Maybe you have no idea why you're even doing that. A couple dudes just with some cool shit in the background talking some cool stuff that I tend to agree with. Join the cave. But I think as you advance through the program, your awareness advances. And then as your awareness advances, you should be starting to develop your intention. Okay, this felt good, like, or that didn't, or this, now that I'm out in the sun more often, I'm starting to notice my mood's a little better. You know what I mean? So, like, the development of intention as a result of the awareness. But before, I mean, I've taken up a lot of space with, I don't know if I even said much, but I wanted to give you a little room to get in there before I go into my top 5, I would say, with regard to primal primer, intentional eating, and how they impact the body.
Yeah, you hit it, man. You used the exact like metaphor I was going to use when describing primal primers, is that this is program always operating in the background, right? There is no departure from it. I mean, you might depart from it. You might maybe not focus on a few so often. You'll eventually find your way back, though, especially as ills manifest or you start noticing a decline in performance in some way or another. But it's always operating in the background and strengthening itself through your practice and through a return and refocusing. And that's the greatest part about that program. And it's easy to do. It's based in these ancient natural truths of like health, thriving, that Homo sapiens, maybe even before we were Homo sapiens, the other species of human were around, were imbibing in the sunlight, the movement, clean nutrition, water. I mean, community, all of these things. Of course, they didn't have the awareness that we purport in primal primers, but they didn't have as many distractions that insulate them from that awareness as we do right now. And not necessarily a bad thing, because I enjoy this modern living, but without guide, it's easy to get lost and forget a lot of those slowly obscuring truths. So yeah, Primal Primers, just an amazing program to ground yourself in, seminal, it's foundational. And then from there, this will help you develop gain clarity and develop your intentions and build complexities upon that. And even more so as you get into apex actualization, which is just another gradation of ascension. And once again, but you gotta do the work, right? You gotta do these lower rung steps, super important, and we'll be operating at all times in the background. So I love that. It's a really great way of symbolizing what this program is and the importance of it, really. So great job in explaining.
Well, we're getting there together. It's a dual explanation. And as you're talking, I'm kind of making notes and crossing things out and saying, no, that doesn't belong, or this does belong, because I keep wanting to create that delineation between primal primers and sapient strength, because as I was writing down like timing and fasting, and perhaps that's a little bit more sapient strength because you're using more technical timing of macros and when to consume nutrition and when not to consume nutrition. Because if we're talking about apoptosis and these kind of things and adapt, like all of these kind of technical terms, those definitely belong in more sapient strength, I would think. But so if I were going to zero in on my top 5 nutritional bridges to impact the sapien from a, or let me back up. Top 5 nutritional modalities to be understood in sapien, and goodness gracious, I can't get it friggin' right. Top 5 nutritional modalities that you will discover within primal primers, and that I think are a daily. And so that those are kind of interchangeable to me. It's like I don't take maca root every single day, but these other things perhaps I do because it's a primal primer and they impact. Obviously, running out of time. It says, what do we got? 10 more minutes. All right, so I'll bounce them off you. Obviously, hydration, water. We talk about that. First thing I do every morning is get water. Just keep my body hydrated. I have a good container water bottle on me at all times, and we talk about hydration in primal primers. And we talk about avoiding plastics. So there are 2 modalities that are discussed in primal primers. Hydration, number 1. Number 2, determining caloric intake, like you were saying. And that primal primer that is around that is know thy numbers, as you mentioned. It's and that kind of goes along with the awareness, I would say, is just, I mean, if you start out and you just join the cave, like there's no need to really zero in on that, but just know it. Like what I mean by zeroing in on it, I would say like in primal primers in the first like few steps, I would say that there's no need to adjust it. Just be aware of it. Like start tracking. Oh, that drink like at Starbucks, like you were just mentioning, is 400 calories. Like, oh my gosh, I have a benchmark. Like, and most fitness apps will set you with a benchmark. Usually around like anywhere from like 2,200 to 3,000, I would say, will set you with a benchmark, and you'll notice how quickly that can go by with what you're consuming. So that would be 2, like determining caloric intake. 2 is obviously macros, and we talk about each one of them within, or 3 macros. These are in no order of importance. Knowing what the nutrition is made up of, the balance of them. Are you eating 95% carbohydrates? I would say a lot of people do and don't even know it. Or fats, like how much protein are you getting versus carbohydrates versus fats, and those are just the 3 buckets of macros, and we talk about each one of those in primal primers, and just that kind of goes hand in hand with know thy numbers, along with each one of the macros that we described. The next one I would say are for what you consume. Know your labels. We talk about that in primal primers. I mean, are you consuming a lot of highly inflammatory oils? Are you consuming stuff that is not primal because it's not a real food? So I think making that adjustment or raising that awareness, again, what you're saying, and making those adjustments, like trying to remove non-primal foods from your body, like highly inflammatory oils, added ingredients, added flavors. Just basically, if it doesn't come from the earth, eat the earth. That's another thing we talk about in primal primers. If it's not coming from the earth, it probably doesn't need to be in your body. And then last but certainly not least, I think is coming back home to this, and this is where primal primers ends, is this state of awareness, and this talking about And that's where I think you develop your intention throughout the program, is as the program ends, or never ends, right? But as the program reaches its culmination of what you learn, and I can extend this time if we need more time, it's 6 minutes left, as it reaches its crescendo and you're learning the material and you're unlocking your glyph and you're able to access more items from the Left Coast Caveman store, and you're learning and you're earning, and now all of a sudden you've got a couple Apex Actualization Supreme Being Alliance members on your side, and you're starting to throw these terminologies back and forth like, hey bro, you know your numbers? Hey girl, you know your numbers? Hey, what's your what are you tracking this week? Or it becomes fun and it becomes a way of life, but then it starts to culminate into this state of awareness, and you start to develop your intention because you start to notice things like, oh, well, I haven't eaten added sugar, and I would add that in the doesn't come from the earth, like anything like highly processed. If I'm eating sugar, it comes from honey or dates or things like that. I don't do like the highly processed stuff. But as you start to remove that stuff, then your awareness like opens up. And so it's not something that you're grasping at. And we talk about that in mentality pieces. It's not something that you're grasping at. As you start to make these adjustments within primal primers, the awareness comes to you. And the intention comes to you, and you start saying to yourself, oh, well, I like taking my shirt off and looking better. I like feeling good. I like not waking up sore. I like moving. I like having energy. I like waking up early and having a lot of energy and sustainable energy throughout the day, etc., etc., etc. And then you also, on the flip side of that, notice, well, when I pound a little debauchery modality, I'm not a big fan of how that makes me feel. In the moment, maybe yes, but in the aftermath, no. And that intention just keeps to build throughout, and that's why this program and this Left Coast Caveman way of life is not a program. It's a way of life that continues, and it's in continuity and throughout life, and this is just the beginning of it. What did I leave out, Sylvester? There's 5 minutes, but I will hit you link number 2 if needed, so don't feel the need to rush.
Well, the good news is I think our list is just about identical, which, I mean, that doesn't really come to much surprise to me, that you would pick out the most important tenets, really, that are contained, obviously, in primal primers, and they're bedrock, right? Like, know your first and foremost, know your numbers, know your calories, right? Know your carbon, know what the amount of fuel you're fueling up with every day, and try to be consistent with that. And once again, like that's that awareness piece is you're learning. Like, you don't need to just go off what the app tells you. Like, log your calories a few times and see what happens. So, like, okay, I'm maintaining my weight. Well, I want to be less. All right, so you take out a few. Like you take out 100 or 200 or wherever, however aggressive you want to be. But that's a great starting place, just knowing it, and then you'll start to develop this literacy around when you're looking to maybe, oh, I'm gonna have a treat, and you're looking like 500 calories. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, that's not even worth it. Like, that's excuse me. That's a quarter of a day's worth of calories, or 30%, or depending. Excuse me. I got some cacao nibs stuck in my throat.
Was that a liquid death, or was that a Mickey's?
It would be so fitting if I'm drinking a Mickey's
while talking. That's what I was thinking.
I really wish I had one right now.
Yeah, that's what I wouldn't be surprised. You never know. Yeah. And then that cough could be put like with a cigarette, a Marlboro Red.
No, this is Zevia, which we can talk more about those. I really like these, actually.
Well, every time I'm drinking a liquid death too, it looks like you're drinking like a 40 ounce, but
yeah, those when you're driving by CHP, right?
Yeah, but anyway, didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah.
No, it's cool. But knowing the numbers, that's bedrock. First and foremost, most important, I would say, on the stack. And then I'm a big fan of knowing your protein. This kind of goes, hand in hand with knowing thy numbers. If you know your calories, chances are you're going to know your protein. That's important, man. Especially as you're getting older. Contrary to popular belief, as you get older and people start experiencing muscle loss, you actually need more protein. One, to stave that off, but just in general, like, you're getting not as efficient at processing protein and breaking down the amino acids. So you need more protein as you get older. And it's hard to get the amount of protein that you should on a daily basis. Now, of course, that number varies. Some people say 0.7 per pound. Some people say 1. Some people say 1 point. Anywhere. I think a great heuristic, 1 gram per pound of body weight. Protein. And then the last two, And once again, this is a very similar list to yours, is organic, right? Eating the earth. And basically what that means is turning the label over on whatever food you're eating and examining it, right? And looking at like, is this organic or not? A lot of times actually that'll be on the front, but it's a real easy one to designator to identify. And basically what that tells you is this food sprayed with some chemicals of sorts, pesticides? Does it contain GMOs? And the science saying that, I mean, current science says there's no difference. And that might be true. That might be a true conclusion based off of the studies that are out there. But of course, a lot of the pesticides that we use right now, a lot of the GMOs, the gene editing we're using in foods, that's really new stuff. So we don't have data that tells us what are the long-term effects of any of these things, right? And I think just keeping it with nature, keeping it with the foods that have helped Homo sapiens thrive since the beginning, it's at the very
keeping
least,
it cave.
Keeping it cave. The foods that are at base level of naturalness without adulterification from said chemicals. So I think this is a real easy one, and it is costly. And chances are, like if you're looking for the ones that are going to be most impactful towards your goals, like I can't say with confidence that is the number one. Like and that's why I kind of listed this towards more the bottom of it. But nonetheless, I think it's important. It's one of my guiding stars when it comes to what I'm eating, and I think it's something most people should attempt to bring more so into your lives where it makes sense, right? So when it comes to meat, that might be more of a challenge. There is a substantial cost associated with eating organic grass-fed meats, whereas when it comes to vegetables and fruits, especially ones that don't contain like their own packaging, if you will, like a banana comes equipped with like its own like little packaging source, right? It's got that peel. It does somewhat of a good job of keeping the pesticides out, but nonetheless, man, like there's going to be exposure that's inside of it. There's going to be GMOs if it is not certified organic. So at the very least, when you get anything organic, you will know that there aren't a bunch of chemicals being infused in this product, and there isn't gene editing or any of those type deals going on that affects your food at the biological level. Hard stop there. And then the last one, it's a fun heuristic, but I think it's, once again, a real easy one to help guide you through your nutritional sourcing, your hunting and gathering in the modern times, eating plants and animals. You think about, you've heard all these other ideas about, the middle of the store is where you should avoid. You go into any, Safeway, Kroger, Albertsons, whatever. Middle of the store is that dead zone. That's where there's all sorts of stuff in the middle of the store, but that's not Homo sapien food. Don't go there. You don't need to go there. You shop the perimeter, and you will pretty much be best served by that. And you think about, I mean, with any grocery store, we're both very familiar with that side of operations. When you enter a grocery store, what is the first department? Well, I guess it depends on which side you enter. But if you enter the main foyer of a grocery store, Mark, what department comes to mind? What department are you immediately immersed in?
Produce.
Exactly. And that's not by mistake. That's the most powerful department of any store in the produce section. Think about all the blooms, all the variety. I mean, it's actually a pretty beautiful place. There's water being misted. Like, it's the most connected. I mean, it's not connected, but it seems like the most instinctually, and like, I don't know, just you feel more connected with. You see all this lush forest of food and fruits and vegetables and tubers. Like, it's a great place to be. So that's the first place you're accosted with. And then usually if you follow that perimeter, what's next?
Dairy.
Could be dairy.
Or it's usually meats. Like,
yes.
It's usually not the kind of meats that you really want, though. It goes like packaged meats and then goes into like the meat and seafood department.
Yeah, exactly.
They hide the dairy in the back corner because that's the moneymaker, and that's the one that most people get no matter what. And they have to... they route people through the store to get all the other junk that you don't want or don't need.
And I would bet, and this is by, I mean, you know the numbers when it comes. I'm sorry to geek out of the CPG stuff, but I do kind of like some of it. The most profitable item in any grocery store, what is it?
Dairy.
Oh, I don't know, man. My understanding is it's bananas, it's produce.
Oh, really? Well, we're gonna have to go to. We can have that cast. We got to have that cast as a cave conversation. So thinking about what we do here on the cast, we really kind of zero in on this And I don't want to distract from your point too much, but yeah, cave conversations at Left Coast Caveman as well. You are talking to two CPG guys who, when we talk about hunting and gathering, obviously most of it happens in the grocery store setting at this point, although we have content around procuring one's foods through either cave terraforming or else otherwise. But we do know our CPG. For those who don't know, that's consumer packaged goods. Food and beverage industry, whether it's food service, retail, you're talking to a couple, at least 3 to 4 decades combined experience experts. And so part of what we do here at leftcoastcaveman.com in making hunting and gathering and health and wellness and well-being supreme being through modern hunting and gathering, making it all more practical and accessible, is ultimately with the idea of influencing the consumer packaged good industry and people such as yourself to making better decisions as you're hunting and gathering through these stores. But I don't want to sideline you too much, but I had to throw that in there.
Yeah, it's fun, and let's just leave it at the fact that the store is set up the way it is for a reason, and there is a reason why the dairy is probably that tertiary spot. Because to your point, people are like, households that consume milk will consume it every week. It's not maybe this week we won't, or maybe this week what's on sale. Now we're going to do oat milk, because it doesn't work that way. Whereas with produce and meat, especially with meat, that's a really interesting compartment. But we won't get there. But anyways, long story short, what I'm trying to illustrate is you hit the produce. That's first stop. Second stop, that's your meat department. Seafood and meat department. And yeah, the third place being your dairy and whatnot, and those are animal associated products, which are very much fine, and I think really fall under eating your plants and animals. Although I don't drink milk, and I don't eat a lot of cheese anymore, but I don't think those are necessarily problematic. They all have their pitfalls, of course, as any processed food does, and those are considered quote unquote processed foods, though there are options that are lesser so processed, especially getting like raw milks and so on and so forth. But anyways, plants and animals, you could pretty much head down to self-checkout at that point, because that's all you really need. Everything else in the middle, that black hole at the center of that store galaxy, not necessary. Now, of course, I shop in it. There's sometimes things I do want. Maybe I do want a sauce of some sort or some spices, and of course, that's totally fine. But generally speaking, it's a great heuristic that will help guide your modern hunting and foraging, and you really can't go wrong that way. And it's not hard to do. Like, if you would change your whole diet. Damn it, I said diet. Don't use that word. You will change your fueling strategy completely, your nutritional protocol, if you just shop around that perimeter and head out the door. Guaranteed. Try it for a month, see what happens.
Yeah, and so as we're wrapping up LCC cast number 68, you can see us getting excited about dipping our toes into sapient strength and into apex actualization. Left Coast Caveman is categorized in those 3 levels in terms of macro programs, macro learnings and earning activities for you to engage with the content that we are discussing in conversation. All of this is available to learn and earn at leftcoastcaveman.com. Hit join the cave, and you will be able to unlock certain tools and access to certain features at leftcoastcaveman.com that will help you understand what we're talking about a little bit more. And I'd say an easy next step is nutritional guides. Making it more practical and accessible for people. You mentioned organic, and yeah, that's not always accessible to everybody on all times, but our nutritional guides could point people to, is an egg, do you actually have to spend this $12 for a dozen of eggs that are sort of encased in their own little, protective shell? Or you mentioned the banana, or is it more worth it to, like strawberries, for example, I've heard are absolutely, you always want to go organic because they absorb a lot of glyphosate and all that kind of junk, whereas it's not always the case with everything, but that's getting nuanced. And so, but that's exciting because I do the same things where I'm like, I don't really eat cheese, but sometimes I do. And that's nuanced stuff. And dairy is going to work for some people and not going to work for others, but getting a grip on the core of the primal primers and then getting into the sapient strength type stuff that we can help everybody with. I'm thinking next time we could start to unroll that a little bit. even just protein, you can talk about meat, fish, chicken, eggs, collagen, like you could go on a whole cast on that alone. And the same with like fruits and vegetables. Like for me, vegetables are my snacking. Like if I feel like I need to get a snack, or I just want, like I'm just busy eating kind of deal, it's a crunchy vegetable is my go-to. Celery, something like that, like it satiates that. And I'm trying to eat a lot of vegetables to keep my body both hydrated and mineralized, and my organs they break that stuff down, and it makes my poop better. It's like all that kind of stuff. It's like cultivating my gut, my nutrition, my digestive tract with all of these like complex fibers and these kind of things, and vitamins and minerals, and like fruits are my dessert. Like I don't eat added sugar, or when I'm keeping it cave as best as I can. I'm not doing added sugar. I'm not doing sweets. I'm not doing treats, which make a date, taken from nature, eating the earth. It makes a date feel like freaking apple pie, dude. It's like a couple of those dates, and you're like, man, that's nature's delectable dessert right there. But I mean, like for somebody who's just joining the cave and just starting on primal primers, which is the base level, I mean, you got to have a nutritional guide, which we'll make available at leftcoastcaveman.com as a way to, as you start to absorb the information and know your numbers, and also just your daily sort of logging. Okay, how much water are you drinking? How much of the non-organic, not eating the earth material are you putting into your body? How does that make you feel? And as you start to make those changes, how does that make you feel? And that's the exciting part about it, is that you start making those changes, your awareness, back to the awareness, your awareness awakens, and then your intention develops as a result. And as you go through the Left Coast Caveman program, okay, then you layer on Sapien Strength, and now you're gonna share in the excitement of that you and I share, and that is like, oh, check this out, like this works for me. Like we talked about, I don't drink milk either, but I drink Lactobacillus reuteri or reuteri. We talked about that on the cast, and that's a dairy, and that's found in the dairy department. And why do we do that? There's layer upon layer on why, and that's all Sapien Strength, and those are guides that we can help people with. But I always do reuteri at a very specific time. You'll never catch me drinking reuteri anytime before 6 p.m. And that's intention, man. That's developed around the program. That's been the Left Coast Caveman way of life. You'll never catch me eating a complex carbohydrate before 3 p.m. Sometimes you won't catch me eating anything until 2 p.m. and sometimes you'll have me eat. I'll eat within the first 3 hours of the day. It's like there's always this. That's the fun part, man. As you start to learn, you start to earn, you start to apply this way of life. It starts to become a habit. Then it becomes that Swiss Army knife of tool. And like the nutrition feeds the body feeds the mind feeds the purpose, the life unifying purpose. Like the more you keep it cave. For me, I mean, I'm talking to myself, it's like, why do we do this? Why do we sit here and have these conversations every week? Why does it never get old? It's because we're always learning, we're always applying, and we always need reminded. And the more we do it, the more that like life unifying purpose comes, like that goes along with the intention. It comes to the forefront of what you're doing, and it becomes magnified. And that's and if you want to get into like conspiracy, we've talked about this. So going back 2 casts ago and talking about CPG, that's what introduced this idea of the bridging between nutrition and fitness. Everything that you do with your body, everything you put in your body and everything you do with your body, is because we started kind of diving into this idea of, well, perhaps it's a little bit more nefarious than we think. Perhaps big CPG, the Nestle's, the PepsiCo's, the people who run the world when it comes to nutrition, or in the people, let's say, that are making the guides, the people that are writing the child nutrition programs. Like, I know manufacturers that are child nutrition approved that I would never feed to my kids what's in that product, right? And I know through our Left Coast Caveman way of life and this project that started back in 2017 and the learning and earning that we've done towards apex actualization, which everybody will learn and earn, is when you don't keep it cave, when you're not doing primal primers, when you're not zeroed in on your intentional eating and you're just eating whatever, and you're not reading your numbers or knowing your numbers, and you're not mindful of how much water you're drinking and what container you're using, and you're not eating the earth, you're just eating whatever in a periodic table of elements and all of these added chemicals and ingredients that aren't cave, and they aren't primal, and you're not keeping it cave. To shorten it up, you're not keeping it cave. You're not executing the primal primers. You're not living with intention. You become like so far removed from, you're just going through the motion of life, and you have no real purpose or vision of what you're doing. Maybe you do, but I'm finding it's less and less. And talk about earlier when you're talking about defining the problem. Look how many people are walking around without any kind of rudder, without any kind of direction. They're depressed, they're angry, they're popping pills, they're engaging in all kinds of debauchery all the time, that isn't feeding any kind of valuable purpose in their life. And they're going to come to the end of their life sometime and be sad and lonely and miserable, and a lot of people ending their life prematurely, not doing anything impactful, not doing anything that leaves a positive impact or mark on your circle of influence, which is the immediate people around you, and then, perhaps even a larger audience that you're not even aware of. But that's the biggest thing that I notice, is that keeping it cave and doing these primer like nutritional modalities, and then layering on the sapient strength, has been like, I don't have to try to find purpose in life. Purpose finds me. And that's an exciting thing to be a part of. And it puts a lot of like wind in your sails, and it keeps everything like directly in front of you. And that's like the biggest motivational factor for me when it comes to me joining and staying in the cave, is sitting here and talking to you every week, and talking to you all the times that we talk, is like, it keeps me afloat, man.
Yeah. And if you're not having these conversations, if you're not thinking about these things, if you're not intentionally just look around you. That's how most people are going through their day. Most people are going through their lives. Just sit at an airport, just go to the DMV and just look at everyone. And
I love that you said airport. Airport's the one that really makes it. Yeah, airport and DMV.
Yeah, it'll hit you. And ask yourself, is this human thriving and surviving right here? Or is this just people just making it by and just blind to how they feel and not having a purpose? And we're not being able to identify that. It all starts with these conversations. It all starts with primal primers. And I look forward to helping other people discover what we've discovered over the last few years, and as we distill it down into practical and accessible programs that can help other people as well and gain momentum. And change the world with this kind of stuff, and I do firmly believe it.
I do too, and it starts with a couple guys like us with an original idea, and with open arms at leftcoastcaveman.com. Join the cave. We want to give. We want to provide. We want to make health and wellness, well-being, supreme being. We want to make supreme being more practical and accessible for everybody. Not just regular being. We want supreme being to be practical and accessible, with a wider range of options, all the way up to perhaps those that are a little bit more affluent can afford higher tech, higher, I would say, like, options that are more accessible to people that are more affluent, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I think that health and wellness and well-being, and that's why it starts with primal primers and not at Apex. Primal primers is accessible to everybody. Everybody can just eat normal food. Don't drink those cookie crumble unicorn coffees, and keep it cave.
Every day.
Every day.